Good morning, students. We'll continue with our chapter 2, that is e-commerce architecture. So, the last lecture we had seen the e-commerce infrastructure depending on the requirements, that is network requirements, hardware requirements, software requirement, network operating systems, in which you have data web server and database server. Now we'll be going with the e-commerce threads. So for going with the e-commerce threads, we have the first one, that is now threads is a vulnerability which somewhere can be prevented, or if it is occurred we can check for the results and make it solve. So vulnerability means checking before, that is prevention before occurrence or a risk factor where it can occur. So for that, the first one is fraud. So an e-commerce website is vulnerable to fraud from both internal and external sources. That is, fraudulent activities include credit card fraud, which exposes the site to threat from customers and external sources, and internal fraud such as fraudulent transactions being entered in the system from the backend by the rogue employee. So what happens is, when you talk about fraud can be from internal sources as well as external sources. So when we talk about external sources, it can be a credit card transaction, a fraud credit card transaction. It can be an source trying to access other users data. This can also be termed as internal. External source. Whereas when we talk about internal source, it can be a wrong entry done by an employee in the backend database. That is, purchase is being done but the user has actually not purchased anything and they are showing the cash entry. So this is called as an internal fraud. So fraudulent transactions can also be introduced into the system by hackers or Trojan horses, with such fraudulent transactions appearing identical to real customer transactions. Yes, now these things can be also done by hackers. Hacker is a person who is trying to hack your data, that is access your data without the user permission, and they look like identical means same, like the user has actually taken out the data. So this can also be done and termed as fraud, that is showing their identical entries in the database of the real customer. Next is security. So e-commerce security issue relate to the internal business network and the interface between customer transaction and the network. So yes, in security in terms of website we talk, or e-commerce, so that can be related to your internal business as well as network. So the interaction between, or the interface between the customer transaction and the network can be termed as security somewhere for e-commerce. So hackers pose a threat to the security of the network as they gain access to internal systems via the commerce website. So hacker, what they do, they try to access the data over internet through network for accessing the user data, and that can be posed for a security problem. So security is where you try to maintain a condition so that your data cannot be accessed by anyone, but this can happen. So these threats can be mitigated by using firewall between the website and the internal network, and by the encrypting the transactional data. So whatever user data if you have on the e-commerce website, if it is encrypted by certain passwords or passcodes, then such data cannot be hacked. As well as e-commerce website should have an internal network, what you say, firewall means a proper authentication so that nobody can achieve or intrude the data. Third one is viruses. Now computer viruses and malicious software are some of the big threats to an e-commerce website. So antivirus, what we call nowadays, is for the connection of viruses, and for that malicious softwares also. Nowadays there are many malicious software, wrong access softwares, which can affect or which can be a proper threat for a particular e-commerce website. Viruses originate from external sources So viruses are always from the external sources to intrude or to crack the data from the e-commerce website or from internet, and they corrupt the files. They become the data corrupt. They remove the data to introduce to the internal network, and they can completely halt or destroy a computer system and disrupt the operations of the website. So they can completely delete the data also with the help of virus, and they can also disrupt the operations of the website. They can also remove that website, or they can make that website totally devastated. So malicious software such as Trojan horse pose an even greater threat as they can capture information on the client side. So Trojan horse is a type of malicious attack which can be done through hacking for accessing the client data from an e-commerce website. So now this is a very big threat, because accessing client data which is on the company's website is somewhere a big task, they can say, and before any encryption software can take effect. So if encryption is not there, that if passcodes and authentication is not there, Trojan horses like such applications can do these problems of attacking. Now they can also be impersonate a customer and pass bad or malicious code in the server running the website, where it becomes an internal problem. They can send a wrong passcode and also attack on the internal website data as well of the e-commerce business. So these are the three things which can be a problem or a threat. So they are fraud, security, and viruses. Now next is e-commerce security. So security, when we talk about only e-commerce security, what it can be, despite the existence of hackers and crackers. Now hackers here means what you can say is hacking the data means removing the data like an actual user but not an actual user. So, and cracking means removing the data and using it somewhere else for wrong purposes. So e-commerce remains a safe and secure activity. So for that, what can be done? At the end of the day, our system is only secure as the people who use it. Education is the best way to ensure that your customers take appropriate precautions. Yes, obviously, to maintain security, what steps can be taken? So at the end of the day, what we can do is we can make our system so secure that it depends on the people who use it. So for that, the people who use it should also be made educated properly, not in terms of normal education, for also how to use that particular application or that software or a particular e-commerce website. And for that, what precautions can be taken is install personal firewalls for the client machine. So firewall authentication, so that authentication is a proper security to access the client data. Second is store confidential information in encrypted form. Encrypted form means a non-readable form which a user cannot read after once the data is stored. Then third one is encrypt the stream using secure socket layer protocol to protect information flowing between the client and the e-commerce website. Yes, setting up a protocol called as secure socket layer. Secure socket layer, what it does, it stores the client information which is thrown on the website. A proper security is being maintained and protected information is kept in an encrypted format so that nobody can access that data. Use appropriate password policies, firewalls, and routine external security audit. So security audit every year, and security audit will be done to check any of the data intrusions are done on the data or not. Then use threat model analysis, strict development policies, and external security audits to protect ISV software running the website. So analysis and development policy should be led to make those things possible. So this is how your security works on, and this is how your employee works on, as well as there is a shopper. Then the shopper should be educated properly. Then the hacker and cracker who is trying to access the data. Then there is workstation and your B2C, business to consumer website, and there is a vendor who is going to access the data. All such things are given here, so that stop wherever it is written how you can stop the particular authentication, software socket layer, you have password policies and external audits. So these are the terms, education, personal firewalls from the company organization sites, and what they can do so that they can stop the hacker and cracker, and how they access your website as well as software vendor who sells the particular software. So this is the diagrammatic trick of what I explained prior. So we'll look forward for first is education. Now your system is only as secure as people who use it. So people are totally dependent on how you use the particular application. So that totally depends on how your system you are going to use. So if shopper chooses a weak password or does not keep their password confidential, then an attacker can pose as that user. So if you do not keep a proper password, or if you are not keeping your passwords authenticated, you are sharing it with somebody else, then this can be a problem for your websites or to access the data. This is significant if the compromised passwords belong to an administrator of the system. So this also depends on the administrator who is looking forward for your data, so not to share the data with anybody. So in this case, there is likely physical security involved because the administrator client may not be exposed outside the firewall. So your administrator only should not have an access outside the firewall. He should have a proper security constraint so that he can maintain the data. Next is personal firewalls. Applying certain antivirus updates, network connectivities, all those things can be done to initiate the traffic which is there for hacking, as well as people intruding the data. Then the next is secure socket layer. Secure socket layer is a protocol that encrypts data between shopper's computer and the site's server. So this layer is one socket protocol which we can say is between shopper's computer, that is user's computer, and the site server, that is a website. When an SSL protected page is requested, the browser identifies the server as a trusted entity and initiates a handshake to pass encryption key information back and forth. Yes, so if it is a secure socket layer request page, what will happen? The browser will identify the entity. It will keep a trust on the entity and initiate a handshake. Now handshake means two different people should come together for handshake, and that handshake will be passing encryption key information back and forth. Means if a website is sending me a passcode, I should know the actual answer of that passcode so that handshaking can be possible, and then only they are allowed to enter the website. This is done with the secure socket layer. And nowadays you have CAPTCHA also, that is they give you a passcode, you have to write in that particular format. If your login and username and CAPTCHA is correct, that is a robotic format for calculating every time randomly generating a passcode authentication, can also be termed as a secure socket layer. Now on subsequent request to the server, the information flowing back and forth is encrypted so that the hacker sniffing the network cannot read the consents. So every time encryption is being done when the data is being passed back and forth, that is from the user and the website, so that hacker sniffing the network, the hacker who is trying to check the network and collect the data, cannot read the contents, as it is in a encrypted format. It is in a non-readable, human readable format. So such websites can be certified by unknown authorities, and also warnings can be shown so that people can check and examine and read the authentication processes, so that the intruding of a biohacker cannot be possible. Next is server firewalls. How we can set server firewall? A firewall is like a moat surrounding a castle. So a proper moat surrounding a castle, that is we can say a zone which we create so that nobody can enter it inside it. So it ensures that request can only enter the system from specified ports, and in some cases ensures that all accesses are only from certain physical machines. So until and unless a system allows somebody to enter in, until that time nobody is allowed in that particular system usage. So this is one type of firewall constraint. So a common technique is to set up a demilitarized zone, that is DMZ, using two firewalls. So two firewalls will be set, that is using a DMZ zone. The outer firewall has ports open that allow ingoing and outgoing HTTP request. Now normal outside firewall, what it will have? It will have only the HTTP request. This allow the client to browse and communicate with the server. A second firewall sits behind the e-commerce server, that is behind the HTTP server. For what? This firewall is heavily fortified and only requests from trusted servers on specific ports are allowed. So a normal firewall for HTTP request, common HTTP browsing request, and one firewall behind the HTTP request is only for the verified servers which have authentication properly. Only they can access that things with a specific number of ports which are being identified by their firewall. They can be said as demilitarized zone. Means what? They have a specific authentication zone. Both firewalls use intrusion detection software. Intrusion means nobody else, wrong person cannot enter that firewall software, as well as to detect an unauthorized access attempts. They can also guarantee unauthorized attempts. Now, another common technique used in conjunction with DMZ is a honeypot server. With the DMZ, that is demilitarized zone, we can also use a technique called as honeypot server. A honeypot is a source placed in the DMZ to fool the hacker into thinking he has penetrated the inner wall. That is a fake, we can say, wall for the hacker, so that they can feel like they have entered the actual website, but it is not like that. These servers are closely monitored. They are always monitored properly, that is checked properly, and any access by an attacker is detected. So such things are properly captured and detected so that any intrusion cannot happen. Next is password policies. Nowadays you have policy and the values. For ensure that the password policies are enforced for shoppers and internal users, you should always have an authentication password so that a correct person logins. A sample password policy defined as a part of Federal Information Processing Standards, that is FIPS, is shown in the table. Now what are the policies and what are the values? That is account lock threshold is 6 attempts. If you exceed 6 attempts, your account is locked. Consecutive unsuccessful login delay, that is for 10 seconds. If you have unsuccessful login for one time, again after 10 seconds it will pop up again. Till 10 seconds you have to wait. Next is matching user ID and password. If they say N, no, they cannot match. So if you put a wrong thing, if they do not match properly, they will not be easily detected, or you cannot log in. Maximum occurrences of consecutive characters. 3 characters can be consecutively repeated, not more than that. Then minimum instances of any character. 4 minimum characters should be there for a password to be created. Maximum lifetime of passwords. You have to keep a password for maximum 180 days, not more than that, that is for 6 months. Then minimum number of alphabetic characters. You can have minimum 1 alphabetic character in your password. Then minimum number of numeric characters. You should compulsorily have 1 numeric character in your password. Then there is minimum length of password. Minimum length of the password should be 6 characters. Reuse user's previous password. This is not possible. If you create a new password, previous password will not be visible for you. That data is being deleted. So this is the policy which is being led by the FIPS, that is Federal Information Processing Standard for password policies. And now also we follow these such types of policies for creating a password. Then intrusion and detection audits for security logs, that is one of the cornerstones of an effective security strategy is to prevent attacks and to detect potential attackers. So prevention is one step before, and if to detect is once it is occurred, to detect and solve it is called as a potential detection. Then this helps to understand the nature of systems traffic. Systems traffic means system trafficking, wrong access of the data, or as a starting point of litigation against the attackers. So we can file an litigation so that wrong processing cannot be done. Suppose that you have implemented a password policy such as FIPS policy described in the section above. That is, yes, if you particularly follow a particular policy and then frame it, it is somewhere a 90% chance that you cannot go in a wrong prescription. So we need to keep such securities for people not to intrude the data. Intrusion is not possible, and audits are done. Yearly checking can be done for security purposes. By this we complete our second chapter, that is e-commerce architecture. So after this, tomorrow I'll be taking a particular assignment on this chapter, and then we'll continue with our chapter 3, that is the network infrastructure for e-commerce and WWW. Thank you.